Welcome to episode 68 of Tales from the Hangman's Record. The stories featured in these videos are all taken from cases in my 3-volume series of books, The Hangman's Record 1868 to 1964, copies of which are available from my website stevefielding.com. Please press like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this presentation, and any donations to help offset the running costs are much appreciated and can be made by clicking the thanks link below or using the link paypal.me/thehangmansrecord. Your comments on whether you believe justice was done in this case and suggestions for further episodes in the series and on my other channel, Crime Casebook, are always welcome. In the days of capital punishment, it was very rare for a prisoner to plead guilty. Doing so left a trial judge with no option but to don the black cap and pass sentence of death. It could be argued that by making this plea, the prisoner was as good as putting his head in the noose, which would surely seem to be the actions of an insane man. But counsel were wise to this, and the prisoner was examined by a medical board before they could be deemed fit to stand trial. Despite this meaning certain execution, in the late 1920s there was a spate of murder trials in which the prisoners pleaded guilty. Today's tale from the Hangman's Record is one such case of a callous swindler and philanderer who stood in the dock charged with a brutal murder. Liverpool, the northwest of England, 1st of June 1928, and the busy seaport was experiencing an unseasonable burst of late spring rain. And it was while taking cover from the sudden downpour in a bus shelter that the man made the acquaintance of pretty 19-year-old typist Mary Agnes Fontaine. During the brief conversation, he happened to mention he was looking for new lodgings, and it so happened that the girl's mother was renting out rooms. By the time the rain had subsided, smooth-talking Reg Kennedy had persuaded her to go for a drink with him, and later that day he moved into her home at 110 Northbrook Street in the Princes Park area of Liverpool. It was as if fate had brought the two together. Mary was charmed by the courteous stranger, as initially was her 55-year-old mother, Alice Fontaine. As he was unemployed, they let Reg take over the cellar in the house, where he set up a wireless repair workshop. Although they knew him as Reg Kennedy, his real name was Joseph Reginald Victor Clark. 21-year-old Clark had been raised by relatives in Kings Lynn, Norfolk, in the east of England. His parents had split up before he was born, and soon after his mother returned to her home in Virginia, USA. Clark was then sent to America to stay with his mother. He was a brilliant scholar, particularly at mathematics, and as a teenager spent a year at Princeton University studying with a professor who taught him psychology and, it was reported, hypnotism. His schooling was disrupted when his guardian died suddenly. With the hypnotic powers learned from his tutor, Clark began to use them on women to great effect. Girls who knew at this time declared he seemed to be a magnetic personality. In a desire to earn money, and without the inclination to work hard or pay rent, he began to charm single women, usually older widows, and very quickly turned from a tenant to a lover. And at all times he was always on the lookout for the next victim. Through trial and error, the serial libertine found the ideal scheme. He switched to young girls, seducing them with the promise of marriage. He soon launched a career as a philanderer, bedding a string of women across the United States before ending up in Nova Scotia, Canada, where he persuaded one gullible woman to loan him a large sum of money. No sooner had she handed it to him, he fled the country, working his passage to England as a wireless operator on the transatlantic liner Baltic. Arriving in Southampton, he immediately began to work his hypnotic charms on a number of women, promising them marriage as they lavished money on him. Soon, fearing his multiple deceptions were about to be revealed, Clark then fled to the north of England and to the busy commercial port at Birkenhead. Yet still writing to a number of past conquests, keeping them sweet with promises that he would see them soon. At one point in 1928, he was courting 4 sisters from the same family in Birkenhead, with each unaware he was bedding the others. When he was finally rumbled, Clark attempted to strangle the youngest girl with a pyjama cord. Fearing a scandal, the family chose not to report the matter to the police, merely throwing him out onto the streets, and it was later that day Clark crossed the Mersey by ferry and the fatal rendezvous with Mary Fontaine. At first, everything went according to Clark's tried and tested plan. He was charming, and Alice was pleased her daughter had met someone she liked. He also boasted about family in America, and somewhere down the line he would be coming into money. Despite his intelligence and skill with the wireless, he was unable to make the radio repair and sales business a success, and was soon borrowing money, first off Mary and then her mother. It was also believed he was now sleeping with both mother and daughter, and both referred to him as Teddy Bear. Although he was living rent-free for a couple of months, Alice was a mature, pragmatic woman. She had found out there was no wealthy family that he constantly referred to. He had no capital, no real prospects of making a good living, and although his charm may have been working with her daughter, it was wearing thin with Mary's mother. Matters came to a head on Sunday morning, the 28th of October 1928. Clark was in the sitting room drinking a cup of tea when Alice began to get onto him about finding a proper job and paying rent. He tried to ignore her, but when she once again asked him when he was going to pay his way, he lost his temper. Jumping to his feet, Clark pulled the belt from his dressing gown and strangled her. He then calmly walked into Mary's room and asked her if she loved him. "I will always love you, Teddy Bear, you know I will," she told him. "I've just killed Mother, and I'm going to kill you," he told her, and attempted to strangle her with a piece of electric flex. Mary fought hard for her life, and although he managed to secure the flex around her neck, he suddenly stopped and then cut it away with a knife. It was as if he had decided he no longer wanted to kill Mary. Mary began screaming, and unable to calm her down, Clark now tried to cut her throat. With blood gushing from her neck wound, she was able to push him to the floor and run her into the street, where her screams had people running to her assistance. Clark followed her out of the house, and on seeing a number of witnesses gathering, stood idly on the doorstep, calmly asking if anyone had called the police. Neighbours assisted as best they could, and an ambulance and police officers were soon on the scene. He made no attempt to flee, and Clark was immediately arrested. Inside the house, on the sitting room floor, officers found the body of Alice Fontaine. As Mary was removed to the Southern Hospital at nearby Toxteth, Clark was taken in for questioning. At the station, he told his story quite readily. Clark said he had persuaded Alice to lend him large sums of money, and allowed him the use of the cellar at the house to use as a workshop where he built, repaired and sold wireless sets. Soon she was pressing him to repay the money he owed and pay his way at the house. Clark said he was in the sitting room with Alice Fontaine when she began nagging him about paying back the money. He lost his temper, jumped to his feet and strangled her. He then made a full confession to the police, admitting the crimes against both women. At the police court, an alleged confession by Clark was read, in which he said he had told Miss Fontaine that he had lost his head owing to something her mother had said, but it was not his intention to cause her death. He was then charged with willful murder. While on remand at Walton Jail, Clark penned a letter to Mary. Number 5945, name J.R.V. Clark, Liverpool Prison, 2/11/1928. Dearest girl, I hardly know how to begin this, and for once I hardly seem to know what to say. Somehow I seem to be trampling on sacred ground in addressing you. I have never ceased thinking of you. It would seem an empty mockery to say how utterly sorry I am, but even the words sound empty. I am sorry. Oh my dear, what have I done to you? Whatever drove me to such terrible things I cannot think, I can give no reason. In your heart I suppose you judge me and condemn me, but how can I defend myself against your condemnation? You must get well, my dear. I know you will, for I have prayed and prayed, through the long hours of the night that you will do so. And I have felt you growing better every day, although at first I had no news of you. Oh, baby dear, I love you still, and I will always love you, and hold the sweet memories of the love you gave me sacred in my heart, and in my thoughts and soul. I humbly kneel before you, and entreat with a pleading heart that you will forgive me. When my trial is over, I don't suppose I'll ever see you again. Heaven knows what justice will mete out to me, but I know this, that if I knew you would forgive me, I could take whatever comes my way with a braver and a stouter heart. I know you have prayed, and still do pray for me. Continue to do so, not so much for my salvation of my now very different body, but for the salvation of my soul. The letter concluded, Darling woman, it is not for me to preach, but it will keep me happy to know that my baby dear will always be the same sweet lovely girl. Perhaps I am no more your teddy bear. God knows I do not deserve to be, but I shall always think of you as I did before. It would make me very glad if you will write to me a little and let me know, directly from your dear hands, just how. If you will write to me, dear, I shall be very happy, and it will be good to know how my baby dear is, and if she could forgive her teddy bear, and if you will utter a wee prayer for him when she opens this, it will help him to come better. Signed, Teddy Bear. There was to be a number of further remands before a true bill was passed and Clark was arraigned to stand trial. In the dock at St George's Hall, Liverpool, on the 4th of February 1929, 21-year-old Joseph Clark stood before Mr Justice Finlay. The case for the prosecution was to be handled by J. Fraser Harrison KC, with Basil Neal leading for the defence. Clark was described in court as a man of slim build, looking older than his years, with his fur hair brushed back from his forehead. He was wearing a dark overcoat. When asked how he pleaded, he replied, "Guilty." Mr Justice Finlay addressed the prisoner. "Now just listen to me. You thoroughly understand what the only sentence can be." "Yes, my lord," the prisoner replied. "You have thoroughly and clearly thought it over and understand." "Thoroughly, my lord." "Very well then, the plea will be recorded." "You have been convicted of murder on your own confession," the clerk of the assizes solemnly told the prisoner. "Have you anything to say why the court should not pass sentence of death according to law?" "I have nothing to say, my lord," replied Clark, clearly and without a tremor. The judge, assuming the black cap, then spoke in tones of the deepest gravity. "Joseph Reginald Victor Clark, I propose to say not one word which will add to what you must be already feeling at this moment. It is my duty to pass the only sentence which our law permits for this crime to which you have pleaded guilty." He then formally passed sentence of death. Clark, who betrayed no emotion while sentence was being passed, said, "Thank you, my lord," and walked calmly below. The whole trial took just 5 minutes to complete. Clark was returned to Walton Jail, but this time to the condemned cell. Despite pleading guilty, Clark decided to appeal against his sentence and penned a 2,000-word document in explanation of his plea. He set his cell up like a study and requested access to a number of law books to help him prepare. Following his conviction, Clark was visited every day by Mary Fontaine, still carrying the scars of her vicious attack. He spent the whole time in the condemned cell writing letters, mostly to her, but also to a string of women he had seduced and deceived, both in England and in North America. He told his counsel he had bedded over 100 women in the last 3 years. His appeal was heard before Mr Justice Avery, Justice Horridge and Justice Rowlett on the 25th of February, was quickly rejected. A few days before he was to hang, he asked the Home Secretary for permission to marry Mary. Despite the horrors of what had happened at her home, it seemed Clark's hypnotic charms were still strong, and she agreed. The request, however, was denied. Clark resigned himself to his fate, converted to Catholicism, and received religious instruction daily. He was the first to be hanged in the new execution suite at Walton that had been constructed in line with many other prisons around the country. Built on the side of I Wing, with an adjacent condemned cell to cut down the walk from the cell and the gallows on landing 2, Clark had been in the exercise yard where he observed workmen constructing the chamber. he turned to one of his guards and said, "I suppose I will be the first to experiment with this toy." Murray visited him on the afternoon before his execution, coming face to face at the prison gates with another woman who had travelled to Liverpool to bid him farewell. On his final night, as he counted down the last hours, he penned out a final poem. "Life, I know not why thou art so dear, but now the time has come to part. And when, or how, or why we met, let's both confess 'tis most unclear. Maybe 'twill cost thee a gentle sigh, but to my heart would fain reply. Then steal away, give little warning, choose thine own time, say not good night, but in some better clime, bid me good morning." On Tuesday the 12th of March 1929, Joseph Clark walked firmly to the gallows and was hanged by Tom Pierpoint and Henry Pollard. On the morning of his execution, Liverpool Echo wrote that a cold, grey dense fog hung like a pall over the jail as a crowd of over 200 gathered outside the prison gates to wait for the notice of execution to be posted. Being of slight build, weighing just 124 pounds, Pierpoint had given him a long drop of 8 foot 7 inches. At the same moment Clark walked to the gallows, across the city at St Bernard's Church, Mary Fontaine attended Mass, praying and mourning the man who, in a matter of months, had turned her life upside down. Why did the chairman Gigolo not plead not guilty and go into the witness box to justify his actions in court? It is thought that Clark wished to spare his victim's daughter the pain and embarrassment of a major trial, and in doing so showed a degree of chivalry that seemed at odds with his past conduct. You'll be watching another tale from the Hangman's Record. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.